the Podski with John Baker. For over 1 year, the revolutionary force in audio entertainment.
Ooh, yeah!
Brother,
Let me talk to you! Freak out, freak out!
I just had an out-of-body experience!
The insane in the membrane!
Brother,
Yeah! And I'm here for only one reason, and that's to take it to the limit, yeah!
somebody stop the damn man!
I'm living on the edge.
Who is your daddy?
Hello and welcome to the Podski. I'm your host, the man of 1,000 gimmicks, Johnny Bake Show. It is episode 67. This is a very special one. We have a lot to get into today. We've been talking about this for a long time. The Podski 100 is finally here. We're going to unveil the first 10 today, 100 through 91. So, we have some general disclaimers that we want to get out up front. That's going to be done by Justin Andretti, and then we're going to get into how we came up with each one of our lists, and that's going to be myself, Andretti, JC, and Mongoose, and then we're all going to come back together Kumbaya style, and we're going to go over 100 through 91. So I'm very fired up for this show. It should be very, very fun. It should be very good. This is going to be something that we're going to continue to do in 2 weeks after we get through. We got hot shots that we're going to be doing, so we got hot shots every other week until Thanksgiving when we get to Hot Shots of Mania. And then after that, we're going to continue zipping along with the whole list every week. So we're going to be doing 100 through 91 today. In 2 weeks, we'll do 90 through 81. And then 2 weeks after that, we'll be doing 80 through 71. So, and then after that and so on and so forth, we're going to, once Hot Shots has concluded with Hot Shots of Mania, this is going to be an every week thing. And we're going to be counting that whole way down to number 1. And we also have the Holiday Awards show. So if you're looking forward to what we're doing here on the Podski, on the main channel, we're going to have timestamps in here for you so you can jump ahead if you want to. If you don't want to hear the disclaimers are going to be something that we're going to have on every single show. For new listeners that are going to hop in as we're doing this, we want them to understand how we came up with our lists and everything like that. So we're going to have the disclaimers in every single show. So if you want to jump ahead, you can jump ahead. Also, if you are wanting to listen to this on YouTube, we're going to cut it up. We're going to put each individual entrant on the YouTube channel. So if you don't want to listen to the full podcast here in the whole form, you can go to the YouTube channel. You're going to get the Podski 100 cut up, and you can see what we said about each individual entrant. And that's kind of how the way this is going to work. So if you want to, we really want people to check out the YouTube. So check out the YouTube at the Podski. Like, review, and subscribe, and also on all the podcast platforms. Make sure you download, rate, review, and subscribe. It really helps out the channel. So we thank you for listening, and we have a lot of stuff planned, so we'll get into it with the overall disclaimers and how we came up with our list. So take it away, Andretti.
The idea behind this was to do a kind of a Podski-wide event and try to get as many people involved in this that have been on the show as possible. And since all of us have so much different perspectives on things and have different a different outlook on different things and different generations and international talent and whatnot, I really wanted to pull this together and have a top 100. But there were some requirements around that. So we started the top 100 with Hogan beating the Iron Sheik in 1984, in January of 1984. And we used that as the starting point because everything after that is different than everything before it. That was the beginning of the very beginning of sports entertainment when Vincent Kennedy McMahon got his guy, Hulk Hogan, put the belt on Hulk Hogan. It started to transcend into WrestleMania 1 a year later, 2 years later, year and a half, whatever. To rock and wrestling is what it ended up becoming, right? Where it became a cultural sports entertainment phenomenon that took off from there. And that was a good benchmark, I thought, to use because everything that came before that was very different, very territory based. Vincent J. McMahon, when he had everything, it was even the WWF was a regional territory. And he probably would not have been super happy with what his son was planning on doing with sports entertainment. So that's a really good place to start, I thought. Now, what we also did not want to do is include people in this top 100 that had the bulk of their career, the prime of their career prior to Hogan beating the Iron Sheik. So there's a lot of people that we're going to give some acknowledgements to here that probably should not be included in this list, because here's a perfect example. To grade Jerry Lawler based on his WWF run post 84 is probably not very fair to him, right? To grade Harley Race on being the king and not the stuff he did before 84 is not very fair to him. So we decided to disclude those people from this list and start with everything right when Hogan won the belt in 84. We tried to also keep tag team guys off of this list. So if it was somebody who the bulk of their career was involved in tag teams, we tried not to include them. We tried to keep this just as singles. And we also didn't include women in this list either. And we're going to do a women's list in the future at some point, and probably tag teams too at some point. So we wanted to keep this just for men's singles with what we were doing. So we had 4 people come together to give a list of a top 100 on their own. And we gave everybody the individual freedom to come up with their own criteria of how they came to their list. So it was myself, it was Baker, JC, and Mongoose all came up with their own criteria that they're going to talk about how they came to the conclusion of the top 100 for themselves. So then once we had those top 100s from all 4 of us, we came together with a point system, and we gave everybody a number based on where they were in each individual list. So as an example, and this is just a number off the top of my head, if Shannon Moore, okay, was number 1 on somebody's list, they would get 100 points, okay? And if Jim the Anvil Neidhart was number 50 on somebody's list, they would get 50 points for that, right? And if in the number 100 person would get 1 point, right? So if that was Evan Courageous, right, at the bottom of the list, he's going to get 1 point from that. So where those people were at in everybody's 1 through 100, all 4 of us had a 1 through 100. We gave everybody points based on where they were in those 4 lists, okay? The most amount of points a person could possibly get would then be 400 points. So we took the top 100 points winners throughout the course of those 4 lists to create our combined list of 100.
So how I came up with my list, I took a list of 500 wrestlers, and that was my baseline, so that I kind of knew kind of where to start, and that way I could kind of dwindle down from there. And I kind of started, I knew I had a top 20 that I wanted for sure, and that top 20 drastically changed after I got my list of 100, and I had to take a lot in and a lot out. But I like the way I kind of graded people out was kind of where they were in the business, what they match quality, at least from what I can remember watching a few matches, and just kind of overall what they meant to the business and whether or not they should actually be on the list or not. Like when I think of somebody who is a top 100 wrestler, like do they actually deserve to be on that list? And that is based off of accomplishments that they had, wrestling style, character work. I really kind of based a lot of mine off character work because I felt like that was a really big part of it outside of in-ring work. And that's how I came up with my list.
So for my 100, the measuring stick that I used first was the Wrestling Observer Hall of Fame. And the reason for that is that I believe that it is possibly the truest Hall of Fame that we have in sport. The NFL and the NBA Hall of Fames have become the Hall of Very Good. And the Baseball Hall of Fame has pretentious writers that either won't vote in somebody that should unanimously be voted in simply because they don't want him unanimously voted in. They will vote in people that have been involved in the steroid era without voting for other people that are significantly better players with or without drug suspicions. And so because of that, I do feel that the Observer Hall of Fame made up of writers, made up of journalists, historians, current and former wrestlers, and it's also regional too. So you have what is, to me, the truest measuring stick of actual greatness in your sport. It's not easy to get to. If you look at the list of who is in the Observer Hall of Fame, it is literally a who's who, and not in the way that, we could say that, yeah, Michael Jordan's a Hall of Famer, but, I'm sure that Antoine Walker will be someday too, and that's not happening in the Wrestling Observer Hall of Fame. Edge isn't in there. CM Punk isn't in there, at least not yet. Same for Edge. Randy Orton's not in there. Jake the Snake Roberts isn't in there. There's a lot of people that you can look. Jim Hellwig isn't in there. There's a lot of people you can look up and down and say, oh, these are the greatest of all time, and they didn't cut the mustard. And so you were not allowed to be ranked ahead of anybody in the Observer Hall of Fame in my top 40 or top 45-ish, I guess I should say, unless you were Will Ospreay or Roman Reigns, which will be first ballot Hall of Famers themselves. So that was where I started. So my first half of my list is all strictly Observer Hall of Fame guys. And then from there, what I did was I basically looked at people that I thought moved the needle. I thought that, whenever you'd said about character development, whenever you'd said about ring work, of course, all those things count. But I also wanted to take a look and try to objectively say, so if I have a new guy, like a Jon Moxley, right, where does he compare to a Lex Luger? And the answer is way above. And the reason for that is that Jon Moxley, while he doesn't have the look that Luger did, he has everything else. He has the same, if not more, charisma. His promos, to me, are better. He's better in the ring. He's had a string of championships across multiple promotions. And he's a guy that has high match quality. And so just using that little comparison right there, that was sort of how I put everything together. Now, do I always have new guys ahead of old guys? Absolutely not. I have a soft spot in my heart that I had to try to back off whenever, ranking all of these people. But bringing objectivity into it was the most challenging thing because, there are people that we all have our favorites and we all have our not favorites. And so it's really tough to say guy that I never liked, and not because he's a heel, but like he didn't do it for me, is better than guy that I did. But hey, man, this is what making lists are all about. So this was a lot of fun, and that was how I put mine together.
So when I did my top 100, I broke everything out by 6 categories, and I ranked everybody 1 through 10 in each of the 6 categories. And one thing that really helped me when I was going through and putting the 1 through 10 grades in was I came up with a baseline where everybody was. So I found somebody who was kind of, between 1 and 10. If they were a 5 or a 6, I would kind of use them as a baseline to see who was higher than them or who was lower than them based on the 6 categories. So the 6 categories I had, the first one I used was placement, and that was kind of where they were actually featured within the cards, right, or over the course of time. In ring obviously was one of them. That's kind of actual talent, whether or not they look like they know what they're doing. Accomplishments, what they've done, of course, and that can be anything from Observer Awards to championships and multiple promotions and whatnot over the course of their whole career. The next one I had was legacy. And that was kind of what they meant to the industry, who they kind of inspired, kind of what their reputation was. The next one was length and consistency, and that was just kind of like a longevity thing to see kind of where were they over the course of time after the January of '84 timeline, if they were kind of still a high placement at that point. And then the last one I had was promotional importance. A little bit different than placement. Promotional importance is something, to the effect of how important are they to the promotion, right? Are they somebody who's like the face of the promotion, or are they somebody who is like a workhorse in the promotion, or are they someone who just gets beat all the time and doesn't really matter, right? So those were the 6 categories that I had, and I gave everybody a ranking between 1 and 10. Most of the people were a 5 and above, because I wanted to keep it pretty, pretty realistic. Anybody below a 5 really wouldn't even be on the list, right? But then I graded everybody, all the numbers up across the 6 categories into an overall score, and then filtered that, and then that gave me my top 100 from there. But then I had ties. Obviously, I had people who had tied scores, and I had to go back in and kind of figure out what I wanted to use as a tiebreaker. And a lot of times I would just use accomplishments for that. Again, I'd look at their accomplishments versus each other. So if 2 people had like a 68, I would go in and look at both those people's accomplishments, and I would kind of just figure out from there who was going to be on top and who was going to be on the bottom of that. So that's how I came to my top 100 for myself.
All right, so for my list, you took a very analytical approach, having listened to you talk about how you did yours. Mine was a little bit more organic, you being a little bit longer tenured of a fan than I am. I needed some help going through some names, so I looked up some general lists of, people they considered the top 100 of all time, 84, prior to 84, after 84. So there was some differences there, and then I tried to filter it all through my lens and into a tiering system. So I had like your S tier, your A tier, your B tier, your C, and D. And then I tried to establish like who I thought was the best of each tier, and then work around that. And the criteria that I used for that was popularity, so like their overall overness, or my perception of that, if it was something I wasn't as familiar with. The number, length, and general importance of their title reigns. Now that could be upper card, mid card, that sort of thing. And some of them don't, they might not have had any meaningful kind of title, but that plays into it. Longevity was a big one for me. So how long have they been doing it? Like, and Austin was on top at a very hot time, but it wasn't a long run. And then general contributions I also thought were important. So I broke that down sort of by innovations they brought to wrestling. An example of this would be like the Ultimate Deletion. So that sort of thing that was cinematic universe, those sort of things would be a little bit different. One thing I thought was very important was, especially for the top end guys, I put this in as a way to differentiate a little bit who they made, as far as, the next star after them. And then just, some general kind of stuff, like if they did, if they headlined some kind of really crazy special show, or anything like that, if they were a booker at some point, those I took into consideration as well. So as I went through there, I just tried to place similar talents in similar tiers, or people I thought were similar talents in similar tiers. And I tried to expand my list. Like I had a list, but it felt skewed towards North American and like Attitude Era, Ruthless Aggression, and a little bit of today. I tried to back away from stars of today as much. So I went and tried to expand my reach a little bit and understand a little bit more of like Japanese stars of like the early, mid, and late 90s. And so in the early 2000s, some of those sort of things where I'm not as knowledgeable and intelligible. So I tried a little bit. It's going to skew towards what I know, and that is what it is. That's why these lists work, because different perspectives. But that was sort of how I ended up trying to come to it. It was my sense, and then a tiering system, doing a little bit of research and trying to filter it all through those criteria.
I'm super excited for this Podski 100. We have, like you had mentioned, we have acknowledgements. So do we want to go over some of these names that did not make it onto the list for various reasons, as they were prior to our cutoff date, or that they had a run kind of maybe later in their career that kind of doesn't really count?
Yeah, I think we can go through a giant list of people that would probably make a number 100, a top 100 of all time. There's a lot of people that could be on that list. So I have a big list here. It's in no order, of course. Antonio Inaki obviously would be on that list. Harley Race, Jerry Lawler, Carlos Colon, Wahoo McDaniel, Ken Patera, Mil Mascaras, Jim Londos, El Santo, Blue Demon, Carl Lagarde, Ray Mendoza, Ray Stevens, Killer Kowalski, Giant Baba, Baron Von Raschke, Gorgeous George, Wilbur Snyder, Billy Graham, Bob Backlund, Bruno Sammartino, Ivan Koloff, Vern Gagne, Lou Thez, Dory Funk, Gory Guerrero, Dick the Bruiser, Blackjack Mulligan, Mr. Wrestling 2, Jay Strongbow, Larry Hennig, Billy Robinson, Pat Patterson, the original Sheik, Nick Bockwinkel, Ernie Ladd, Jack Briscoe, Larry Zbyszko, Buddy Rogers, Stan Stasiak, Gorilla Monsoon, Bobo Brazil, Dick Hutton, Pat O'Connor, Ricky Dozen, Whipper Watson, Angelo Poffo, Don Eagle, Gene Kaniski, Antonino Rocca, Edouard Carpentier, Ed the Strangler Lewis. Now, look, there's going to be people that are not on that list that we just forgot in the moment that we would include in a top 100 of all time. But again, we started this with Hogan winning that belt against the Iron Sheik in January of 1984.
Correct. And literally those names that are on there, those are some of the who's who of the wrestling business, like of all time. And we wanted to make sure they got their flowers, they were acknowledged. But yeah, you got anything, Mongoose, you want to say before we hop into our list?
Andretti, did you say Pampero Firpo?
No, but we need to.
There we go. That was it. That's all. Like, just like to run through a list like that. I was, sort of running through a mental checklist right there. Shouts to Pampero Firpo, man.
All right. So today we're going to go over 100 to 91. This is our very first installment of the Podski 100. And get a little drum roll here for number 100. And it is Sergeant Slaughter. He came in with 49 points. JC gave him the most love. He was number 52 on JC's list. And what a way to start us off here. Sergeant Slaughter, at least from my deepest memories of Sergeant Slaughter, has got to be WrestleMania 7 and all of that build with Hogan. But let's say you guys, what do you guys think about old Sergeant?
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, that guy had to be sweating bullets over that Iraqi turn, man. I mean, I don't know how much money they paid him to do that. It had to be a ridiculous amount of money, but just the fact that you're just walking around with a target on your back after being so pro-America for all those years and going up against Hogan at Mania, they flipped it. They flipped the belt to him at the Rumble that year to set up the Hogan match in Mania, which was it was not a great time in the industry at that point.
Yeah, and I, with that Hogan and Slaughter match, interesting that Slaughter makes this list because I, growing up, had a handful of VHS tapes that were the. Do you remember and you wouldn't, John, because you weren't born yet, but Andretti, do you remember the compilation VHSs that you would get, the Coliseum video ones?
Oh, absolutely.
And so one of mine was WrestleMania's Greatest Moments. And I watched 1,000 times Hulk Hogan giving Slaughter the leg drop with that Iraqi flag draped over top of him or whatever. And I didn't see that Mania live. That was a year before that I started to really, really get secondhand tapes and everything. But that memory is huge for me. The Sergeant Slaughter Hasbro, that was one of my initial, probably 20, 30 guys that formed the Fed. And the one thing about Sergeant Slaughter is that I always coveted the G.I. Joe. And even though I wasn't a G.I. Joe collector, because he was a wrestler, that my friends that had it, I was always uber jealous of it. And so kudos to him for being a cultural icon in that sense, man. You had the cartoon, you had the that G.I. Joe figure is great. And then he was able to, after that whole Iraqi, what was the face turn? Was it before that 8-man tag or was it after the 8-man tag? I specifically remember him being a huge baby face in an 8-man tag that might have been like a SummerSlam. I don't think it was a Survivor Series, but you know what, the turn had to be before then, because he was on a team with like Tito Santana and like everybody that was as white meat as they come. Virgil, I almost guarantee you Virgil's on that team. And so, those are my young Sergeant Slaughter memories. And then character work, man. Look, dude, he was great as a commish. He was great. And I absolutely loved him being in that Stooge Brigade. So, good on him for all of that.
And I think too, it's such an iconic character when you think about that golden era of the '80s with WWF. I mean, hats off to that guy, man. I mean, he really created such a long time memorable character that almost everybody knows who Sergeant Slaughter is, right? I mean, he's got to be in the top 10. He's probably in the top 10 of people that everybody kind of knows who Sergeant Slaughter is. But, he's a guy that had a figure in every major line, right? I mean, he had the LJN, he had the Hasbro, he had the Commissioner in the Bone Cruncher era, he had Elites. I mean, that's a pretty impressive thing to do. I mean, everybody remembers the turn, right? The Iraqi turn. That's the first thing everybody's going to think of. But that Rumble match in '91 with the Ultimate Warrior. I mean, on paper, it probably doesn't sound like the greatest match in the world. I mean, and look, it's not a 5-star classic by any means. That match is better than people give it credit for, and I do encourage people to go back and check that out.
I found that 8-man tag. It was WrestleMania 8, so it was the next year, and he teamed with Duggan, Virgil, and the Big Boss Man versus the Nasty Boys, the Mountie, and the Repo Man.
Oh my gosh. I hope all of them are on the rest.
So as heel in his face as it could possibly be. Not just did they turn Slaughter face, they put him with the faciest faces versus the heeliest heels. Do you know what I'm saying? So, and I'm fairly certain that Slaughter gets the win in that one. I might be mistaken, but I think somebody gets the Cobra Clutch.
I'm sure they did. Yeah.
and if it wasn't the finish, it was after the bell. You know what I mean? He gave him the old one after the bell to pop the crowd.
If you're looking for a Sergeant Slaughter match that's kind of when he was a baby face right in that era, he takes on the Iron Sheik in a boot camp match in June of 1984. That match is on YouTube, and those guys kill each other. It's very physical. There's blood. They're in there just beating the crap out of each other. Slaughter's bumping around. He's moving really well. I mean, people don't realize either. I mean, for him being a pretty big guy, that guy was pretty agile. He's probably an underrated guy in terms of athleticism. So hats off to him, man. He had an unbelievable career in the WWF and made a lot of money doing it in various roles, and it's pretty impressive.
Great entrant into the Podski 100 out 100.
Do want to note really quick that his most famed match, I believe, is pre-cutoff, but if it's not, it's close. And I've never seen it, but I've heard a million things about it, is that he has like a street fight or an alley fight or something against Pat Patterson that's supposed to be the thing of legend. So maybe add that to your weekend watch list.
Sure. I think that looking at that now, I haven't really been into figure collecting for a little while because we moved into a house and it's been, expensive to do those things. But, with the, I really do think that the Slaughter LJN in good condition is probably my grail piece at this point as a collector. And I can honestly say that.
Yeah. The one thing I wanted to put over is the Elite that came out, or the Ultimate that came out a couple years ago, that was the San Diego Comic-Con exclusive. I have that one in the collection. It's one of the best Ultimates that they've ever done. The only thing I wish that was different about it is that it had the double jointed elbows, but I absolutely love that figure.
What a great character, man. Just for the way he jumped into that role and just owned every second of it and made it feel like it was a real thing. Just awesome. Hats off to him, man.
Yes.
Dude, he owned it so much that he kayfabed the country into thinking that he actually was a drill sergeant.
Yes, that's how great.
With no military service.
It's so good.
That's the crazy part, is that people found out and he was like almost disgraced by it. You know what I mean? Like, you're in a fake industry and he had to be disgraced by kayfabe and
You think the thing about Slaughter too, man, is when you look at that golden age of the '80s with WWF, they've got so many awesome, defined, different characters that are in that company at the same time. And for Slaughter to still be one of those guys that stands out above almost everybody in people's memories and in pop culture is amazing.
Absolutely agree.
So when I was looking at my list and I was thinking of, my tiers and where I could put people in these tiers, the easiest one was thinking of like the top guys, Flair, Michaels, Hogan, Sting, those sorts of things. And then you start to filter down, and I obviously he's kind of associated with Hogan, at least for my recollection of it. And I know he did some things before and had a match with Warrior that was high profile, that sort of thing. But for me, I was thinking about it today in preparation for this, and he's more of a cultural icon. He crossed over into other things, and that was sort of bringing them back, like he with the GI Joes, and he had a ton of merchandise with them, and he had a ton of exposure and bringing them back to WWF, WWE. So, and you think about the toys, like that the LJN and things like that. That was so sort of that working, having enough of a background and being a good wrestler for the era and a character, more importantly, especially when you think about the I Want My Country Back and the turn and all that stuff. But then also being sort of a cultural driver as well, and bringing eyes from other things. And I mean, you can even look at it today. He's still doing conventions. He's still signing. He's still a very big part of that wrestling lexicon of being Slaughter. Like, I mean, they even resurrected part of his gimmick to try and get Lacey Evans over. I mean, nothing was going to get her back over, but whatever. So I think in that regard, that's why he kind of made my list, that sort of overall impact and being a part of the wrestling lore and lexicon.
All right, so heading into number 99. Number 99 is Masahiro Chono. And that is what Mr. Andretti had him at 52 as well on his list. So he came in with 49 points as well. And I remember Masahiro Chono from WCW. So I'll let you take it away because you had him on your list, Andretti.
Yeah, look, Chono's a guy that I just fell in love with him during the WCW run, the NWO run. It's just a bad dude, man. He came out, he just looked so cool when he came out, and he had, Sonny Ono was with him during that time. He just, when he came on the screen, he just was such a villain, and he fit that role so well. I mean, that was a guy that really came into his own when he finally decided to go heel, when he was in New Japan and he went heel with that character, is when he really started to come into his own. But most of us were familiar with Chono based on the WCW run, the limited WCW run. And I remember, man, I remember being a kid, being like late mid to late 90s whenever Chono was there. I guess I wasn't really a kid, but I was kind of a teenager at that point. But I remember watching the WCW B shows at the time, just to see Chono, man. And I just was captivated by this guy for some reason. The finisher was so awesome. That was a big, very physical guy, man. And looking back on that from my own standpoint, he's really the reason why I wanted to start getting into international wrestling. Because I was never a tape trader growing up, nothing like that. But to hear about these people, you hear names thrown around, but you always heard about Masahiro Chono, and then to see that guy come on screen as a larger than life character, that was a guy that really made me want to start getting into specifically Japanese wrestling. Look, I love Great Muta. When I was 7, 8 years old, I loved the Great Muta, of course, Spit in the Mist, everything. You guys, fantastic. But when I kind of got into my fandom is really when Chono made his mark on me and left a big impression on me as a impressionable fan for sure.
Yeah, and some accolades for him, Wrestling Observer newsletter wise. He won the Best Heel Award in 1995, Best Gimmick for NWO, and he was a Observer Hall of Fame inductee in 2004.
Yeah, and look, you talk about the New Japan stuff that this guy's done. I mean, we're talking about a New Japan heavyweight champion. It's kind of crazy to think about that Chono was such a staple of that company and only really held the main title one time. I mean, look, 7-time tag team champ with Keiji Muto, obviously the great Muta, and for Hiroshi Tenzan, 7 times he was champion. NWA World Heavyweight Champion. The guy really was a G1 guy. Just Mr. G1, right? He was Mr. G1. So he ended up winning the climax, 5 different times. He won the G1 in 91, 92, 94, 2002, 2005. I mean, that is just an unbelievable run. That the G1 climax is the best tournament in wrestling, and for him to be able to pull that off and win that 5 times throughout the course of his career is awesome. And also to piggyback off what you said, he won the G1 Tag League in 2006 with Shinsuke Nakamura. Yeah, the guy who had an unbelievable career, even way into the the mid aughts at that point. I tried to find. It's a shame, man, because I tried to find that. I tried to find the Nakamura match in 2005, the G1 match with Chono and Nakamura. But that New Japan World website is impossible to navigate. And I was complaining to Mongoose earlier about this, but I was trying to find that match on the on New Japan World and just couldn't even find it. But I did find the 2005 match, G1 match with Vegeta. Really good match. It was only 9 minutes. But if you're looking for something and you've got a New Japan World subscription, I would recommend you go and check that out for sure. The other one I wanted to say, we're all very familiar with Kenji Muto, the great Muta. Everybody knows great Muta. But the G1 final from 91, I watched that a couple times over the last couple weeks or days to get in preparation for this. I've seen that match a couple times, but look, man, those guys tear the house down. So if you're looking for something awesome to watch this weekend to kind of get you acclimated to Masahiro Chono, I would recommend you go check out that G1 final from 91 with Muto. Or if you got, you're short on time and you want to go watch a good match, the 2005 G1 with Fujita is only 9 minutes. I would check that out too.
And I just want to, I should have added this to my initial disclaimers, but I will say now that Chono is one of these guys that fits into my cutoff was if I didn't see you, I didn't rank you. And it was only because I didn't want to rank you wrong. Does that make sense? And so Chono, to me, sure. I know Chono versus Jericho from that first Sold Out show, right? The NWO, the all black and white, the Miss NWO pageant, all that other jazz. And so that's where I remember Chono, and I know he was an Observer Hall of Famer. Like, I saw all this stuff, but I didn't want to put him in somewhere when I only could ever really recall one match. Could I have done homework? Absolutely. Do I have a job, wife, and kid? Yeah. And the thing about it is it's the kid that takes up all the time. You know what I'm saying? Because once I start to watch something, if it doesn't have Judas or Adam Cole's song playing, then I'm watching Spirit Halloween walkthrough videos because she doesn't care about what I'm doing. So I didn't have a chance to give old Masahiro his due, but he deserves to be in the top 100. I'm glad he made it.
All right, so we will move on to number 98 comes in with Rick Martel. The model Rick Martel comes in with 50 points, and he was on myself. He was on my list, and he was on Mongoose's list. So he came in at 84 on my list, and he came in at 68 on Mongoose's list. So look at Mongoose giving him the high rating.
I'm ashamed of myself because he's one of my probably top 10 favorite guys. And this is what has been really challenging about this too, is that you got your favorites, right? You got people that you're rooting for people to get in, right? But it's so hard to just be so objective about it. Mark, if we would have done a top 125, it would have covered everybody that I love, right? But we cut it off at 100, and there were people that I just had ahead of them that I just in my head couldn't justify it because I knew I was going to be a homer if I did. But I am so glad that you guys put him on those lists and he was able to sneak into the top 100.
Absolutely. Yeah, he was a 3-time WWF Tag Team Champion. He was in the tag team tournament with Tom Zink in '87. He was also a WCW television champion. He was in Stampede Wrestling. He was kind of all over. So I am a huge fan of Rick Martel. One of the matches that I wanted to put over was one that we just talked about recently here on the show, was the one from SummerSlam '92 with Shawn Michaels, and I loved that match. I haven't seen all of the model stuff, but after kind of seeing bits and pieces, it makes me just want to go back and watch so much more of him. And I just really felt that he deserved a place on the 100.
Yeah, Mongoose, I know that SummerSlam match has got a big place in your heart, but that's one of my top. That's probably in my top 10. That's probably my top 10 favorite matches.
Yeah, and so I have him so high for 3 reasons. The first one is the blindfold match. Dude, it's not a good match, but it's an iconic match, right? And so if you say blindfold match to a wrestling fan, they're gonna know what you're talking about. They have sacks over their head, and they're doing the feeling it out. So it's iconic in that way. That SummerSlam feud with Shawn, where you couldn't punch each other in the face, and all of that around it was great. And the other reason, 4 reasons, because these 3 are WWF ones. The third one is that Tatanka feud, dude, where he sprayed arrogance at Tatanka's face and he started wearing the feathers around with his little, beret, was so great because that was in the midst of the Tatanka undefeated run. And, he really, really did a wonderful job of being this, like, not a final boss, but a level boss for Tatanka. And so when he got his comeuppance, it was great. And he made my top almost 3rd because of the WCW run. Look, man, everybody thought he was done, and he was very, very good when he came back.
Dude, that guy was the late 90s. He was fantastic into the late 90s. He was still one of the best workers in the world at that point.
Yep. And so I would have been remiss in not putting him on there because when I think of wrestling, I think of those guys. And again, I gave my thing before that he wasn't top tier to me, but he was up there for the second tier, whenever I look at the tier 2 guys. And so the fact that he made it is all that I cared about. And so bless the child, Rick, you did it.
I would say the WWE Hall of Fame is overdue for him. I mean, for a guy that was 3-time tag team champ, and was just such a great heel, upper mid card heel for them for a long time. It's a guy that should be in the WWE Hall of Fame.
And I don't know what his relationship is with them though, because he had that one Legends figure that literally had the "I'm a model" thing on it, and
that's worth
$1 billion now. And I think that it's $1 billion because you ain't getting that. I don't know if he's going to be signing a Legends deal anytime soon, unless Jeremy Pradauer shakes him down in a urinal somewhere.
So speaking of that WCW run that you mentioned, I mean, he did win the TV title at one point. He was WCW TV champion.
Yes.
And I did not have this match written down, but I remember him having a really good match with Booker T in the late 90s. That was on Nitro, I believe. That was fantastic. So if you're looking for a match there, go check that out. The other match I wanted to put over, obviously Martel was the AWA World Heavyweight Champion. I mean, I think most people know that, but I mean, I don't know how good AWA was at that point, but I watched the Hansen match last night. I found it on YouTube. It was from October of '85. No, actually, that's not right. It was from '85. It was from 1985. It was AWA Super Clash. They had it in an outdoor stadium, kind of the first like stadium stampede. Dude, that match is 5 minutes long. Him and Hansen are in the crowd. They're in the dugout. They're killing each other. It's plywood all over the ground. I mean, it's it's a mess. But Martel, fantastic worker, man. I mean, an unsung hero of pro wrestling for the last 25 years. I mean, actually more than that, probably 40 years at this point. But I mean, that shows you how old I am. I don't even know what year it is. I still think it's 2010. But it's awesome. What a great worker that guy was, heel and face, for sure.
No, the last thing I needed to say, because I got to my big feuds, and that one with Tatanka was the huge one because of those feathers hanging off his thing. But when I was a Ute, I got in a lot of trouble because the Boston Crab was a move that I was able to do to my 6-year-old sister whenever I was 8 or 9 years old. And so when well, yeah, right. And whenever I'd sit back on that thing, man, yep. I got hit with the slipper a couple of times.
I would say that she deserved it then and probably deserves it now.
Exactly, dude. Exactly, and I couldn't believe how easy it was once I was able to apply it. The sharpshooter took me a minute to figure out. The figure 4 was even tougher, but I'll tell you what, I won't name him just in case he's not a fan, but a former homie. He was we were at the brother Abe's house as children. And I think we just went to a live concert, like All Over You, All Over Me live, you know what I'm talking about, from York. And we came home and we spent the night at his house. And before we went to school the next morning, I slapped the figure 4 on this kid and he screamed bloody murder, man. I put it on him tight. And so that was whenever I found out that, like, yeah, you could stretch some ligaments that way. I was 11.
I mean, who among us hasn't put a friend or a relative in the walls of Jericho, Boston Crab, etc.?
That was
right,
Rick Martel. You were my gateway to putting submissions onto other people and making them feel real pain.
Thank you, Rick Martel, for teaching the mongoose how to do that.
Yeah, thank you, Martel, for doing it. All right, so number 97, coming in with 51 total points, we have Kevin Sullivan. He was on JC's list at 96, and he was pretty high on my list at 55. And I love me a little bit of the Taskmaster. The 3 Faces of Fear versus the Dungeon of Doom, him doing all of that stuff. It's not saying that it's all good, not saying that, it's Hall of Fame worthy stuff, but to me, it's such good shit that I love it. And he just did so much good stuff. And the one thing, he was also booking at the time. I felt like I had to add points onto that, just because he was booking and working at the same time. He's very well known for, some of the things that he did prior to our list. He was working with Dusty in Florida as learning how to get heat and all that. And he really brought that to WCW. And at least matches that, a match that I want to put out there is the one with that him and Chris Benoit beat the absolute living tar out of each other on that Bash Beach. I can't remember. Is that 96?
They had a couple of those matches. There was one San Francisco death match from Super Brawl 97.
Yeah, I know that the Bash at the Beach one was the one where they were actually hitting each other because of Nancy. So I personally love that. I thought it's fantastic. He maybe, you may think he's a little high on my list, but I just felt because he did the booking and the working at the same time, I had to give him a little bit of his due on that end.
Varsity Club is great because it wasn't the Steiners, it was Rotunda and oh my gosh, Andretti, give me the other one. It was Rotunda, and because they were the varsity boys and he was the evil Satanist that was making them love the devil and not football. Oh my God, I'm on it. I got you, brother.
And that was kind of where I was at too with it. I mean, obviously he played early with, in the Hogan era in WCW. He played a role with that. He was also with the Steiner. Sorry, first day with my new mouth. The Steiner brothers with the Varsity Club, or not? I'm sorry,
So Doctor was it Dr. Death and Rotunda?
That's the end of a long day. My brain, or is he with Varsity Club? I get it.
Okay, because I knew Rotunda was one of them.
It was Dr. Death, Steve Williams.
I was thinking the WCW run. Anyway, but so not only that as a singles guy, but as like a pseudo manager, and then what really drove him on the list for me was he was in that booking kind of nebulous that they had in WCW's hot years.
I know Mongoose has got the Dungeon of Doom really close to his heart. So you wanna riff a little bit on the Dungeon of Doom?
So I got 3 things to say really quick. The first one is that upstairs in my drawer is an airbrushed shirt that has Kamala, Shark, and Zodiac on the front, and on the back it says Dungeon of Doom. It says Dungeon of Doom with a heart around it. So that's thing one. Thing
it's one of the
2,
best shirts I've ever seen.
Yeah.
Is that a Stash Pages classic?
Yep.
Huge shout out to Stash Pages.
Thing
baby.
2 is that the Dungeon of Doom, man. I should also say that it's my fantasy league football team name in the family related to Andretti, whose name rhymes with Flarunic. I'm the Dungeon of Doom in there. My name is the Taskmaster. My image is Kevin Sullivan talking to the Great High Chief, whatever his name was. Those vignettes where Hogan all of a sudden was just in a dark and terrible nether realm. What are we doing, man? Like, I'm 11 and I'm buying it. I'm like, oh my gosh, how did Hulk get here?
All in.
Yeah,
it's all in.
Yeah,
all in.
Yeah. How did he get here, man? Like, what happened? And now, like, I'm looking back and I'm like, so did we send Hulk interdimensionally? Was the dungeon in like deepest, darkest Antarctica? Where was we don't know, man. But all I know is that one dude sat there and just goes, Hogan.
Yeah, it's Prince Ikea's dad, King Ikea. That's who that was.
Plus the child, man. And so it's just so great. I couldn't think of what they called him whenever I was saying that, so I was avoid saying his name. But him being all just dusty, crusty, just like looked like he was covered in chalk. That was so awesome, man. And so yes, the Dungeon of Doom, it means a lot to me. It really, really does, especially because when you said, John, that you gave him extra points for being the booker, and immediately I was like, oh, John's giving him points for immediately saying, hey, we have Hulk Hogan, let's book him versus the devil, which is what they did, man. They just put Hulk versus Satan. They absolutely, Kevin Sullivan, who renowned, hey, I'm going to play a Satanist guy on TV, was like, you know how we get Hulk over and make money?
He never said that. No, it was just implied.
Implied, right. So you know how we get Hulk over? We have him face Satan. And he went as far as to paint horns on his eyebrows. And for those reasons, man, I do have a lot of respect for Kevin Sullivan. He didn't make my 100 list. Talking about all this, maybe I should have had him in the top 30. Maybe I screwed up here. But the one match that everybody needs to see is the oh my gosh, it's Dungeon of Doom. Give me 1 second. Is it a War Games match on
the Chamber of Horrors?
I think that it's a War Games. Yeah, it's the War Games. It's the War Games, and I just want to make sure it's the War Games where all of the baby faces are dressed in fatigues and military stuff, and it's Hogan and it's Luger and it's Sting. So look, man, I don't even know if that match is good. I remembered it being one of the greatest things I ever saw, but it can't be.
I can make it. I can play some.
It can't hold up. But I'm telling you, if you want to smile and have a good time, it was. Let me go see what this War Games was. 95, Fall Brawl 95. There you go. So that's my recommendation. Go watch Fall Brawl 95 and have yourself a good time.
I've got a couple notes here on matches that I watched over recently for Kevin Sullivan. So the San Francisco Death Match is Super Brawl 97. Amazing. I mean, they're all over the arena. There's a really great table spot where Jackie is laying on top of Kevin Sullivan on a table, and Benoit jumps off the top rope and crushes both of them, and the table doesn't break. It just kills both of them. And I laughed out loud at that. But there's a match.
I am the table.
Yeah, speaking of Fall Brawl, there's a Fall Brawl 94 loser leaves town match between him and Cactus Jack. I mean, look, man, Kevin Sullivan throws Cactus Jack off the top rope to a cement floor where the padding is removed, and then goes over and picks him up and body slams him on top of it again, which was unbelievable. And then later on, Cactus Jack tries to pile drive him on the cement, and Kevin Sullivan backdrops him onto the cement. And I'm just sitting here like, what the hell are we doing right now with this? The match I really want to bring up, this is unbelievable. I watched this last night for the first time, I think, ever. Starrcade 94, Kevin Sullivan versus Mr. T. Mr. T is wearing a referee outfit for some reason, and like an old-timey nightcap that is also striped like a referee shirt, right? I have no idea why that is.
Like Ebenezer Scrooge.
Like Ebenezer Scrooge.
I love it. I love it.
It certainly helps financially to be friends with the Hulkster at that point.
That's how I like to picture my Mr. T is dressed like Ebenezer Scrooge about to meet the spirits.
Dude, at one point, Mr. T is on the outside of the ring just laying on top of the cameraman for no reason, and the cameraman is just on his back holding the camera, and it's just unbelievable. I laughed out loud when I saw that. There's a part in that match where they're fighting on the outside. Kevin Sullivan leans back to hit Mr. T, and a fan in the front row grabs his hand to stop him from hitting Mr. T. And I popped to the freaking moon. And then Mr. T wins that match when Santa Claus interferes. And I'm not going to give you any more details than that. Santa Claus interfered in the match, and that was it.
Wow.
But I also want to say about that show, about that Starrcade 94, that show opens with Duggan and Vader. And also on that card, Alex Wrong and Triple H.
Wow.
Dude.
So I want to do one thing before we move on. I want to have a shout out to Leia Meow, who it's a perfect segue into our next number on this because she worked in ECW. But to fact check my own thoughts earlier, he was indeed with one of the Steiners in the Varsity Club when he first came to JCP. So he was working with with Rotunda and Rick Steiner. So it was at the beginning of Rick Steiner in JCP around 87 or so. And then they reformed it, and this is how I knew it, because I watched an episode of WCW, later run WCW, when they reformed it with Leia Meow, aka Kimono Wanaleia, which is potentially one of the greatest names ever in ECW history. So wanted to fact check myself. I knew I was right about that in some capacity.
No, and I saw that. And here was the thing: with me with early WCW, late JCP, I wasn't watching it. Right, I didn't see it. I didn't know, and so my earliest WCW was Saturday night, and then I would buy the NWA WCW tapes on pay-per-view. And so the earliest ones that I could remember had the Steiner brothers. And the only reason that I knew that Rotunda was a Varsity Club person was that I would listen to the Observer shows where they would review the old NWA shows. And I remembered Rotunda. And when you said that, and the more that I thought about it, Steiner was certain, because Steiner was in first. Scott wasn't there. Rick was there first, and Rick was supposed to be the big guy, and then Scott ended up coming in and having all the charisma. So yes, so we one hand washes the other, and both hands wash the face.
There you go. That's
Please go and watch Super Brawl 96, Pillman versus Sullivan, Pillman's last match in WCW. This is the beginning of the loose cannon angle. It's an I quit match. Instead of I quit, it's a respect you match. And Pillman picks up the microphone and says, "I respect you, Booker Man," which completely breaks kayfabe, enters into the fourth wall, all that other stuff. Iconic moment in wrestling history. So if you don't know, now you do. Check out Pillman versus Sullivan Super Brawl 96.
All right, so coming in at number 96 with 51 points, we got Shane Douglas. He came in at number 87 on Andretti's list and number 65 on JC's list. So we'll let Andretti take it away on old Shane Douglas.
Boy, I can't say enough good stuff about Shane Douglas. He is one of my favorite guys of all time, and I'm really glad that somebody else voted for him too, and that we could get him in here on points, man. I mean, all-time favorite of mine, man. He's a big Pittsburgh guy. I'm from pretty close to Pittsburgh. We got to all stick together, man. But my memories of high school are somewhat tied to him because of going to all those ECW shows with a lot of my friends, and we would just travel around on weekends. And I remember that was the first car I ever had, and we would go to the Jaffa Mosque in Altoona, and we would go to the Ice Gardens in Rostraver, and we would just drive around and go to these ECW shows, man. And I've always really loved Shane Douglas so much. Like I said, man, big Pittsburgh guy, can't hate him on him for that. The dudes with attitudes were insane. They were coming out with skateboards and whatnot. It's an insane gimmick, but it was wonderful for the time, wonderful for what it was. Dean Douglas was a perfect gimmick for the time in the WWF. I kind of wish it would have went a little bit farther with that and with his WWF run. I mean, Douglas was a guy. He was in his own way, probably more often than not. A guy that had an unbelievable amount of talent. The talent was always there. People still to this day, I think, still tend to overlook it a little bit because he's kind of made enemies over the years. His different travels around the wrestling globe. The Triple Threat was one of my favorite factions of all time with Candido and with Bam Bam Bigelow. You guys know I'm a big Bam Bam Bigelow fan. I'm actually going as Bam Bam for Halloween, believe it or not. But I have I got a Shane Douglas shirt, a franchise shirt to this day, man. I wear it all the time. People always talk to me whenever I'm wearing that shirt. They give me a shout out, and we start talking about Douglas a little bit. I mean, look, man, the guy's a big founding father and even the face of a major industry changing promotion in ECW. He was a perfect fit at that time to give wrestling credibility to an upstart extreme promotion. And for him having such a chip on his shoulder with how things have ended at other promotions for him, and him having so much talent, just an unbelievable guy that did a perfect match at the perfect time with him in ECW, man. And going back and watching some of those matches was so much fun. Him coming out to Perfect Strangers by Deep Purple, one of my favorite entrance themes of all time, man. I can't say enough good stuff about Shane Douglas.
Yeah, and I had him on there as well. Shout out to him for also being a good education man. He was a teacher before he was a wrestler. But just kind of being one of those foundational guys, jack of all trades in ECW, being the guy to carry the water more often than not. And, working with everybody in that promotion and having the high profile stuff. That's kind of why I had him on there. I felt like he was an underrated. A lot of what Andretti said there, I echo a lot of those sentiments. And he's still working today a little bit. He, within the last, I don't know, maybe 6 months, he tagged with Brian Myers from Major Wrestling Figure Pod. So he's out there still working a little bit. He's hitting conventions and stuff. Go support him. And he also has one of those iconic scratchy voices that you hear it and it's like, that guy. And he's iconic. He had the action figures. He had that late WCW run. And so, yeah, just kind of all that rolled into a lot of what Andretti said.
I mean, he's a pretty decorated guy too. I mean, going through the list of accomplishments for Douglas, 4-time ECW world champ, actually 2-time ECW world TV champ. He was the world heavyweight champ of the NWA. Won the MLW championship at one point. And looking at some of the WCW stuff, like you said, I mean, the hardcore title, I don't even know if it's even worth mentioning that, but the WCW US heavyweight.
Whoa. Hold on. The WCW heavyweight or hardcore title is one of the most prestigious prizes in the game. Shout out to Hot Shots Wrestling. We are getting that sucker over, baby.
So he was
Randy Orton,
WCW US heavyweight champ one time. He was tag team champions with Steamboat. I think people kind of forget that because that was before he was after the Dudes with Attitudes era, whenever he was with Steamboat in a really good tag team. He won the tag titles with Buff Bagwell at one point too. NWA World Tag Team Champs, stuff like that. But the thing too about Douglas, there's 3 matches that I thought were pretty good to go back and check out if you're interested in checking out some Douglas stuff. The Sabu Terry Funk 1994, the night the line was crossed, 60-minute draw. Okay, now look, I'm gonna tell you that now it's a draw. I don't want you to spend an hour watching a match if and then be disappointed. Somebody's gonna tell you that up front. Very weird match. A lot of people get involved, a lot of shenanigans. The match at Guilty is Charged 99 with Taz is awesome. They're fighting all over the place. When they were actually in the ring together, man, and there were no shenanigans going on, that match was just excellent. You get to see Taz in his prime. I mean, just phenomenal. And then believe it or not, he had a really good match with none other than Ric Flair, who's pretty good. So Slamboree 2000, Ric Flair. I don't remember at that point if the two of them had real heat or not. I know that Douglas felt very slighted by Flair years before that and had a big chip on his shoulder. I love the Shane Douglas gear here in this match, man, when he's wearing like the zigzag pattern on his trunks with the Pittsburgh colors. In classic WCW fashion, nothing can be a clear finish. And some asshole in a Sting mask has to run in and hit Flair. It's not even Sting. And I didn't even stick around to see who it was because I don't care. But the match at that point was really good, and I just was glad to see Douglas in another major promotion at that point. Even though WCW wasn't what it should have been, it was still good to see him out there on TV. And the stuff he did with Torrie Wilson was excellent too around that time. So big shout out to Shane Douglas, man. I'm glad to hear he's still working and still doing his thing.
All right, and number 95 with 56 points, Tomohiro Ishii comes in on Mongoose's list at 45.
45, baby. And the reason why is that I had 42 Wrestling Observer Hall of Famers, but I put Reigns and Ospreay ahead of him because they are surefire first ballot Observer Hall of Famers. Tomohiro Ishii is the best wrestler that in the world that is not in the Observer Hall of Fame that is eligible. And if he does not make it, it is an actual shame. It's more of a shame if Ishii doesn't make it than Edge, than Randy Orton, than CM Punk. And let me tell you why. Tomohiro Ishii, I never heard of until about 2017. 2017 was the year that I heard about the Omega and Okada match from Wrestle Kingdom. Watched that on Daily Motion or whatever a couple of weeks after it happened. And I really liked that dude that dressed like the Terminator, right? I didn't realize that he was in the ring with a guy that is literally top 5 of all time. But, at that time I was like, this dude, the Terminator getup is really cool. So I started to follow what they were doing. And that led me to watch a little bit of Ring of Honor television. And at that time, Axis, I believe it was the channel that was playing the G1 in the USA, the first ever time that New Japan came to the United States in early Japan 2017. And there was a little tournament for the new IWGP US Championship. And Kenny Omega beat this guy named Tomohiro Ishii for the championship. And to be honest, in my eyes, I was watching, Shawn Michaels versus Dean Douglas, right? So you guys just talked about Shane Douglas there, but just the star versus the guy he's supposed to beat. That was what I was seeing. And so I didn't know Tomohiro Ishii. I was just like, okay, Japanese guy in a Japanese promotion, whatever. I was watching along then, and then the next year's G1, I watched that. That was the most watched G1 that I've seen as in terms of match volume. And Kenny versus Ishii, I turned on my laptop in the middle of the evening one day and started to watch, and I literally was slapping my dining room table like halfway through with near falls and stuff. These guys laying it into each other, V triggers and brain busters and forearms and everything else. And at that moment, I said to myself, well, if I ever have a son, which, spoiler alert, I did not, nor will I, he will be named Tomohiro Ishii Mongoose. Okay? Because this dude was killer. Kenny was unbeaten in the G1. He did lose to his first loss, I believe. It was either this one or it was to Yano, because Yano tied him up in tape or whatever. But this was one that would have cemented him in the block, and he lost to Ishii, and it was so good, man. It's a 5-star plus match. It deserves all of them and maybe more. I actually had written down here, G1 Omega 2018, 76 stars. So I did give it a little bit more than 5. It's so good. And my favorite thing about Ishii is that he will have matches with Will Ospreay that aren't Ishii matches, meaning that he can literally fly around if he needs to. And he can then have matches with somebody that's like Master Wato or something that turn into brutal slugfests. He can absolutely mold himself to whoever it is that he's wrestling, which is it's up here. If you want to talk about consistent 4-star match quality, there's nobody better than him. Well, there's a couple people better than him, but he's up there over the last 7 years. And the best thing about Ishii is that he's 5'6", and he walks around like he's 6'8". You know what I mean? He presents himself like he's feet taller than he is, and that he's feet wider than he is. And that's presence, man. It's one thing to be, fueled up with gas and you can't even move or whatever and not be able to work. And it's another thing to be a small guy that is so impressive in what you do physically that people think you're way bigger than you are. So to me, dude, he's awesome. So bless the child, brother. My time I said that, but he deserves it.
Yeah, I had some notes here too on Ishii. I don't think people realize, like you were saying, how many great matches this dude has had, even in just a short term recently. I know one of your, like you said, one of your favorite matches of all time, if not your favorite, was him and Omega. I went back and watched 3 matches of him just recently, and all 3 of them were from this year's G1 from 2023. That Kingston match is just
that Kingston match is insane.
The Henare match is great. The Finley match, I mean, as a tough and respected guy, man, that guy did a really good job making Finley look great. I did not have Ishii in my own top 100, but I wanted to say that I think that history is going to be really favorable to him when it's all said and done. he's going to be a guy that people are going to look back. They're going to think is going to be just fantastic. And I wanted to say too, real quick, that when you think about the perfect example of kind of what a professional wrestler really is, I don't know if I can think of a better example than Ishii. When you of a professional wrestler, who's better? Who's a better example than that guy, man? For all the things that what you said, it's just so physical and good at presenting himself as a real threat to win, even though he doesn't win really all that much. Awesome, just awesome.
Ishii is better Scott Hall. Like, he's better Scott Hall, meaning that Scott Hall is everybody's person. How did this guy ever win a world title? Blah blah. That's Ishii. His matches are better. His presentation, just in terms of a physical presence, is better. Character isn't better, quote unquote, than Scott Hall, because Scott Hall has iconic characters. But to me, he's better working Scott Hall, because Scott Hall was able to put together. He had a 5-star match with Michaels, but then he was a consistent good match guy, right? Like, you're never going to see a bad Razor Ramon match or a bad Scott Hall match until 1998. But the thing with Ishii is he's still cranking out 4-star matches, and the dude's 50 years old. That's the other thing, is that he's doing all of this and he's very not young. And there should be a lot to be said for that. So even though, his timeline isn't the same with the boom period of wrestling, what he's doing at the level he's doing, at the age he's doing it, for as long as he's been doing it, is incredible, man. And so, yeah, I'm happy you're here, Tomohiro.
Yeah, I mean, the first thing I think of are the wars that he's had over the years with just Suzuki. I mean, it feels like those guys.
Those Suzuki matches, man.
I mean, dude, they could be on every card, and I would watch every one of them. If they were on every single card, I would watch them. But looking kind of at his accomplishments, I mean, that guy was best brawler in the Observer newsletter 6 years in a row. He was best brawler of the decade of the 2010s. IWGP Tag Team Champion with Yano one time. Never open weight champion 6 times. Never open weight six-man tags 3 times. What else can you say, man? I mean, there's just great matches every time he gets in the ring.
Well, and that's how good you are, is when you put tag him with Yano. Do you know what I mean? Because Yano is the biggest gimmick that there is. And the fact that you're able to say this guy's such a good worker that we can put him with somebody that only just ties people with masking tape to the ring post, the whole time. And we can make them a viable tag team. That's Ishii, that's it. So yeah, he's great. He's so great. So I hope that when we redo this list, revise this list rather, whenever we revise this list, may you be a couple of spots higher, Tomohiro, because you deserve it, brother.
Absolutely. All right, and coming in at number 94 with 57 points, we have Matt Hardy. And JC had him on his list at 100, and I had him on my list at 45. So the reason that I had Matt Hardy so high on my list was because he was becoming a single star. He was transitioning out of the tag team division, and he was transitioning into a singles run as I was at the peak of my fandom. And everything that Matt Hardy was doing with the Matt Hardy version 1, that is one of my top 5. I feel like that's a top 10 gimmick for me. The all of the little nuggets that they used to leave with the Matt facts on the lower thirds and everything, they're so good. And then it transitions into his feud with Edge after, Lita cheated on him with Edge, and then that spilled over into real life. That feud is so iconic. Everyone talks about that. The love triangle feud. It's so good. And then, just another reason that I had Matt Hardy is for everything that he did post WWE too. Whenever he was in TNA, they got really weird with that broken gimmick, and that broken gimmick is something that is like, it's legendary at this point. The yes, and like the cinematic matches, that full character arc that he kind of created fully on his own, that only somebody like Matt Hardy can do, is fantastic. And he eventually comes back to WWE with Jeff, and then they do the tags again, and now he's been in AEW where he's still doing single stuff. Now, granted, it's not the greatest of work. I will be right up front with you on that. It's not the greatest work, but brother's still out there making towns, putting in the time. And, I love Matt Hardy. I feel like he is the forgotten brother that, that deserves to get his flowers. And I always felt that, Jeff was the high flying, flashy one of the bunch, but Matt was the technical wrestler behind it all, that he was the one that made the sausage at the end of the day. So that's pretty much why I have Matt so high on my list. I love Matt. But yeah, so I don't know what you got for Matt, JC, but takes away.
So to me, his biggest impact is the innovation.
Yeah.
Right. He was the brains behind the Hardys. He was more of the mind of what's going on in the match than Jeff might have been. But if you look at his own, singles runs, he's always been, well respected. And so I'm just looking here at some of the titles. First of all, he's a Maryland Championship Wrestling alum.
Yeah.
So, big shout out to Maryland Championship Wrestling and their one-time heavyweight champion, Matt Hardy. But he
also owned his own promotion at one point too. Like, let's not forget about that.
Yeah. And again, it's WWE ECW, but he was the ECW heavyweight champion.
Mm-hmm.
He had some mid-card belts and things like that. He had a good run in TNA, twice as the world heavyweight champion. But I think honestly the biggest thing is the cinematic stuff is where I think of him. I mean, obviously we're not talking about tag teams because that's a different stratosphere for him and Jeff. But as a singles guy, I think a lot about that, and I think about when he came into AEW. I mean, his introduction into AEW, it was the pandemic, but he was brought in as a big deal, right? And he was thrust into, at the time, while they didn't have a lot of storylines because they didn't have a lot of people, but he was brought in as, with the highest level storyline. He was brought in at the same time as Brody, that sort of stuff. So, and I think now, more than anything, he's giving back. He's helping out the young guys. When you see him, he's out with the young guys. He's working in the back with them, that sort of thing. So to me, he's not one of those guys who's solely based on in-ring work, because I mean, he's not the greatest worker but you look at the mind of Matt Hardy and what he's accomplished and what he's been able to put out there that's creative and innovative, and the overall legacy and impact that he'll have. That's why he made my top one.
The one thing I wanted to say about the tag, I know we're not really talking about tag teams, but I want to say one thing is it's a testament to him. Those guys literally started out as small vanilla jobbers in that tag team scene on like Saturday mornings and would get annihilated. And they wowed themselves into a career by just showing how much they had innovation wise and just being so creative. I mean, you got to give them a lot of credit for that, man. Because they kind of broke the mold at that point coming in as a tag team. So the one match I had written down was the Slammiversary 2016 match, which is on YouTube. It's him versus brother, him versus Jeff. It's two brothers that are out there loving what they're doing, killing each other, big bumps, ladders and tables, everything you'd expect. So if you're looking for a singles match to check out, the Slammiversary 2016 versus Jeff is on YouTube.
And for me, I actually think, to piggyback off of what JC said before, the one thing that sort of got in the way with him being a a pseudo Jericho in that you are this big name that's there to elevate everybody else, was that Sammy Guevara feud. Man, nobody wanted to lose to Sammy Guevara more than Matt Hardy. That was all that he wanted to do. He would get on the microphone and say, Sammy, you're so good, blah, blah, blah. And then, Sammy knocked him out cold as ice. And then, Reby lost her mind on social media when that happened. And then he got another concussion, right? Was it 2 concussions in 2 Sammy matches? Yeah, and so that was just so snake. But I just really felt terrible because, just like JC said, man, is that he came in and he was with the Elite in that Stadium Stampede match versus the Inner Circle, which was the biggest feud that company had. And that match that's the best match of 2020. I know that there's better wrestling matches, but that match, for what it was in the time frame that it was filmed and everything else, I watched that match with Brix Malone and Slovak Ibushi, and Slovak Ibushi watches no wrestling, and we were high-fiving each other and laughing and everything for 45 minutes. And then I showed that to my father-in-law, and we were high-fiving each other. Just like, that match was so perfect. And they picked Matt Hardy for that, for a specific reason. Like, when he was going into the dunk tank and coming out as different iterations of himself, like, that stuff's so good, man. It really is. And then what ended up happening was, I think that he sort of, got his legs cut off from under him when every time that he wrestled Sammy Guevara, he would get absolutely injured. And I think that for his own good, that they were like, Matt, like, we can't put you in high profile places because we want you to see 60. You know what I mean? Like, I think that was where that came from. And it stinks for him because, then he was in a much more reserved role. But just be ready for Hardy's versus Edge and Christian. Probably sometime around the New Year's Revolution show or whatever that's called.
Mm-hmm. Hope so.
The last thing I'll say about Hardy before we move on is because of his ideas and innovations, especially with the cinematic match, and you guys will appreciate this, he's the reason The Undertaker finally retired. He did, because of his matches and his ideas, they finally found a way to put a nice bow on the Taker and end it. So we should all give Matt Hardy a big round of applause for retiring The Undertaker. I know you guys don't like it. So.
Taker's over huge in this house, man.
Well, we love Taker. All right, so now number 93 coming in with 58 points.
Damn.
We got Ron Simmons, and he was also He was also on JC and I's list. He came in at JC's list at number 65. He came in at my list at number 79. And obviously, when you think of Ron Simmons, you think of APA. But I just felt that Ron Simmons, the things that he did in WCW and becoming the WCW World Heavyweight Champion in the early 90s, I just feel like that is just something that was not, he's a trailblazer. That's just something that was not done. And for him to be able to get that world title and then, have all of this longevity within the business. Now, in WWE, he was a career tag guy, but I just felt that he had to be a part of the list as when he needed to be recognized for that World Heavyweight Championship win.
Fake, I would say one thing. He wasn't a tag team when he was the head of the Nation of Domination, because he did headline a pay-per-view with The Undertaker at that point.
Correct. So, yeah, and that's that was another thing I wanted to say. Like, his work that he did in the Nation of Domination, that it was a group, and he wasn't always working tags there, but he was, I mean, you're correct. He was working in that main event scene for a little bit with Undertaker, and it was all really good stuff. Like, he was just really good in the ring. He was credible. I mean, he played at Florida State. Like, he's a very decorated athlete, and I just he has to make the list alone on all of those things.
He was the hands down leader in a group that had The Rock in it. You know, like that
Yes.
is something to be commended, is that he was the guy that was like, and I remember, you know, being a fan then, that like I knew The Rock was his subordinate, right? And so to see what The Rock became, like, it's pretty cool. My God, that helmet that he wore though first, whenever he came out with Sonny, was a disaster.
Speaking of The Rock, real quick, was that The Rock's first major feud? I mean, outside of the Nation of Domination, because did they kind of use Farouk to get Rock over? Was that the feud? Or was there something else before that?
It was, because it was The Rock and Triple H. And then after that, the dissension came with Rock and Simmons. But then that was where Russo booked himself into 30 Years of Fame, where he booked that Survivor Series where The Rock did his turn. Because that was The Rock's babyface night until he joined Vince McMahon. Because The Rock had turned on Farouk or Ron Simmons or whomever. Now, I guess it was Farouk because it was the Nation. So The Rock had turned on Farouk, and oh my gosh, the people love him. And then, oh dude, you know, he screws over Foley, and you know, now he's the corporate champion or whatever. And then all Russo did was turn that into a show about curing racism. We are the nation, the domination. Bless you, Vince.
Yeah, that was I really wanted to with this highlight, like John said, the idea that he was the first Black world champion on such a high profile stage. I think that really says something about him as a human, and him as someone that they could, you know, put that on and give that distinction to. He was, by all accounts, he was always a very loyal and very hardworking guy. He didn't always, you know, didn't need to be flashy, didn't always need to see it, but I think that cultural impact alone, if we put Matt Hardy for his innovations and his cultural impact and that sort of thing, I think Ron can go in there as well. But yeah, just to piggyback off that helmet was rough. Farouk Assad.
Yep. Wrestle crap in the best way. But I'll tell you what, man, that WCW Galoob figure. So what we did when I was kids, my gosh, hey, English, right? When we were kids, what we would do is, because every WCW figure came with its own title belt, we would write with a pen what the championship was on the inside of it. So if it was your U.S. champion, your Intercontinental champion, tag champion, whatever. And Ron Simmons in those blue capri pants, man, that's a great figure. And Ron Simmons had himself a couple of runs with our mid-card belts. Ron he never cracked the main event. Sorry, Ron, you might have done it in WCW, wasn't doing it in my Fed. I'd take her running the show and Marty Jannetty and stuff at that time. Yeah, dude, that Galoob with the blue capri pants is a pretty iconic figure. And I know that this isn't a tag team thing, but Doom is so great. Oh, is Doom so great? Shouts Bricks Malone. Bricks Malone was born for Doom.
Yeah, that I believe whenever Bill Watts came into WCW, it was one of his top priorities, right? Was to flip that belt from Vader to Simmons. The only weird thing about that is that they did it on that main event. It was a main event. It was WCW main event. August the 2nd, 1992. It's on YouTube. It is a very good match. It is the right length. It's about 11 minutes. Man, that place goes nuts whenever he wins that belt, man. I mean, it's one of my favorite things in wrestling when all the baby faces come out to celebrate whenever a baby face wins the belt, and everybody storms the ring. The people are going nuts. I don't think that they drew well after that with him on top as champ, and I think that kind of look, man. I don't know why that stuck with him a little bit. It's never really just that person's fault when that happens. But I think that kind of stuck with him a little bit. The fact that he was on top and didn't draw super well as champ. But go check that match out, man. That Vader match, WCW main event, August 2nd, 1992. It's on YouTube, like I said. The Undertaker King of the Ring 97 is a pretty good match. It's accessible, I want to say, because it's accessible in Peacock. I remember thinking at the time that they might actually flip that belt, and I was even kind of hoping for it at that point that they, whenever Farouk was at the head of the Nation Domination, I thought maybe they were going to flip that WWF belt to him as well. But I remember being at Liberty Park, swimming pool, neighborhood swimming pool when I was a kid, and someone telling me that Ron Simmons became the world champ. And I specifically remember I thought that was good, but I remember thinking, wow, he must be better than I thought he was. And I was surprised by it, but in a good way. Like, good for him, man. I really like that guy. Like, I'm really happy that he won the belt. So I remember being, almost 12 years old whenever that happened, and it being a pretty cool moment.
And my thing with Ron Simmons is that when I was really watching was after he won. And so I only ever saw him introduced as former world champion. Do you know what I mean? And so he had instant credibility with me. Like that was what was wild, is that like I didn't see Doom and stuff until later. And so when I'm watching Saturday Night or whatever, and he's coming out for, his match versus whatever, Ice Train, he's being introduced as former world champion Ron Simmons. And they said every time they would say it, and I do give them a lot of credit for this, they would say beat Big Van Vader for the belt, because at that time Vader was unstoppable. And I think that's something that's sort of missed a little bit in today's commentary, is to note who, if they don't still have the belt, note who they beat for the belt. I think that's a really important thing. And not do it in the way where it's, Michael Cole saying, and he beat the Miz, and he beat the Baba, and he beat the Baba, and he beat the Baba, and then the Baba. Like, if you can give this seminal win over this important person, that sticks way more, So the next time that, Jey Uso wrestles a singles match, when they say this is the last man to pin Roman Reigns, that matters. And that was what happened with Simmons and Vader, was that they put that over, that like this guy beat Vader for the title, and that gave him credibility throughout his entire WCW run. And then when he came to WWF, he had it with me, except that helmet was so terrible. He even had Sonny, but he had that helmet. Oh, shoot. I'd wear that helmet tomorrow, by the way. I'm just saying it wasn't a good look for a guy in 1996. Yeah.
I've seen you wear that helmet.
Yeah.
Was that helmet always blue, or I seem to remember a silver version of that helmet too?
Yeah, I only remember blue.
Maybe it turned silver once the paint wore off.
Me too, but I'm on it. Nope, I got a blue and a silver helmet. Absolutely a silver helmet right here, standing next to Sonny. Silver as silver can be, man. Shockmaster silver.
Speaking of iconic helmets that we need to do a show on, Podski, top 100 iconic helmets by wrestlers.
Dude, there is a Farouk. The Farouk figure has a silver helmet. The Elite 98 figure has a silver helmet. $13.99 on Ringside.
You know what's good about the Bone Cruncher, the Farouk Bone Cruncher? It's got both its arms out in front, like a boxer, so you can just swing the hips, and he just keeps throwing body blows. That's pretty cool.
For Christmas, I don't know, maybe it was whatever year it was, a couple of years ago. I gave Brix Malone the entire Nation of Domination as the Bone Crunchers.
With Clarence Mason was included?
With Clarence.
All right, moving on to number 92. Coming in with 58 points, we have Kofi Kingston. He came in on Andretti's list at number 68, and he came in on JC's list at number 76. So Andretti, take it away.
Yeah, I'm really glad that he made it. What an incredible athlete, man. I wish they wouldn't have saddled him right out the gate with that fake accent. But he's a really decorated guy. And I don't know if people realize how decorated Kingston really is, even as a singles guy. When you go back and take a look at this, Wrestling Observer best gimmick of 2015, which is really great. I mean, that was with the New Day, of course, but when he was WWE, he's WWE champion. He's 4-time Intercontinental champion. 3-time US champ. Tag team with the New Day a million times. Of course, we all know that. NXT tag champs, all these things, man. I mean, this guy is he's one of the top athletes that they've definitely had over probably the last 25 years. And I know sometimes the Royal Rumble hijinks, I think kind of whip people's ass a little bit, with doing the chair spots where he's jumping onto the chair and not really being eliminated. But for me, I actually think it's kind of cool to see that, and to see somebody do something that's a little bit outside the norm of the Royal Rumble. I was a little concerned he wasn't going to get into top 100. I'm very glad that he did. I think they kind of did him dirty on that the WWE championship, the end of that belt when he finally beat Daniel Bryan. It was a big moment, and it was awesome to see that. And then I think they kind of did him a little dirty on the outbound whenever he finally dropped it.
Yeah, again, I think the body of work, even as a single start, excluding the tag stuff, you can put him in there. I mean, we didn't talk about it yet, but he's a Grand Slam champion. I mean, that doesn't happen, if you're, average. And I remember even not really being super interested in the WWE product at the time, but knowing that Kofi was champion and being interested in that. I think there's something to be said for there being, someone who exudes positivity and happiness as a draw. I mean, you see different guys who have different gimmicks and that sort of stuff, but there's something magnetic about him as a performer. And then again, sort of like with Ron Simmons, you have that extra bonus layer where he's an African-American champion and he can be a model for other people on top of being a top tier athlete and a Triple Crown winner and just a consistent performer, whatever he's asked to do. So that was sort of where I put him in there for that. And yeah, man, I'm a little bit newer of a fan than some of the other guys, but he really sticks out, even that Ruthless Aggression run. So yeah, I was consistency with that, I think, is a lot of it too.
Yeah, I don't think we want to get too into the weeds with the tag team stuff, but I want to say this solely for this reason. When you talk about the top WWE tag team of all time, it's got to be either them or the Usos, right? I mean, New Day is so decorated and so beloved and sold so much merch. I mean, I would almost say that they're probably ahead of the Usos at that point.
You can't argue.
That would be the reason. That would be the reason that I didn't include Kofi. Is that even with Kofi Mania, I felt like Kofi Mania was a product strictly of the New Day. Do you know what I mean? And that was why I didn't have him personally. I'm not saying he doesn't belong on the list because look, man, he's great. But just what you said, them being such an iconic, and that the New Day is going to be something they talk about for years and years and years and years. And so for me, Kofi's a New Day guy that got hot because, like he would have stumbled himself into a run, had a hot match or two, and then there we go. And the fact that, they had Brock beat him in 8 seconds on the show that had 5 million viewers, and the debut SmackDown shows what they thought of him. But that's another story for another time. Right.
Yeah, that's a shame.
Thanks, Ben.
There was there's a really good Raw match from May 31st, 2021 with McIntyre that if you're looking to check out a singles match, obviously the WrestleMania match with Mania 35 with Daniel Bryan's obviously great, 2019. But if you're looking for something to check out this weekend, it's not super long. The Drew McIntyre Raw match, May 31st, 2021. Really good match, man. That's as good of a Raw match as you're possibly going to find. That was with the fans on the screens, and I, believe it or not, I actually kind of forgot about that already at this point. Those are memories I probably don't want to remember anymore of that, the COVID era. But like, man, go back, watch that match. It's him and McIntyre tore the house down on Raw, and it was a really fun match.
All right, and our final entrant of the show coming in at number 91 with 61 points, LA Park, and he was on Mongoose's list coming in at 39. So we will let the Mongoose take it away.
So here's the reason that I have LA Park this high is because, as I had said in my initial disclaimer, if you are Observer Hall of Fame, then you are above everybody else. And the reason why is that you have been vetted by people that know way more than I do. And LA Park is one of the people that made that. My first memories of LA Park were as La Parka in WCW in the late 90s. Was he in Revenge? Was he in Revenge, or was it the one afterwards?
Oh man, that's a great question, because I know exactly what you're talking about. I can't remember.
He's in one of those games. He's in one of those games, and he's great. And so like to come out, and you play the electric or the air guitar on a chair. You're the chairman. All that stuff, dude. Like such a great gimmick at the time, and you think that he's so slapstick because of the way that he was sort of presented in that, cruiserweight hour in those Nitro days. And then you come to find out that he is a, very, very decorated Mexican wrestling, superstar. He was in a match whenever I was an Honor Club subscriber, whenever Ring of Honor had the Bucks and all those other guys. I heard over and over again that I needed to watch the Triple Mania show. There was a 4-way with him, with Pentagon, with Psycho Clown, and another fella. And I'll tell you what, man, it was a masky bloodbath. Spanish commentary the whole way through, like one of those things where you're just digging it. You're living in the environment and absorbing basically the way that it's meant to be, with the the homegrown commentary and everything else. Like nothing is made for you. You're sort of you have your glasses on through the eyes of the other people. And dude, that was a ball watching that match. Like I was very glad that I did. There was an iconic feud. And I believe that it was with Psycho Clown. And if I'm wrong, then I'm very sorry. But I know that there was a big either mask versus mask or mask versus hair match that LA Park was supposed to have with somebody. And this was going to be like the match of the century. And this was in 2020 or 2021. And so for him to be 15 years past his WCW run and to be able to have that kind of clout, and to make the Observer Hall of Fame, this is where I defer to people that know more than me. And the reason that he is rated so high, again, is that if you were in the Observer Hall of Fame for me, you're above everybody else on my list, because those people that vote know better than I. And so LA Park, you deserve it. Also, I have an LA Park mask upstairs. I cannot wear lucha masks. At first, the first one I wore was a Jushin Thunder Liger mask, actually. Scared the bejesus out of my baby mongoose. And so I wasn't allowed to wear that after a picture at Halloween whenever she was a newborn for her first Halloween. But my La Parka mask is still upstairs, waiting to be worn. If she ever lets me, I will. I will go in the full skeleton gear for Halloween. This year I will be Mario, and she'll be Princess Peach. So if I ever can get out of dressing like her, I'll be La Parka. So you mean that much to me, LA Park.
There's actually a fantastic photo of that first All Out of myself in the Jushin Liger mask and Chig in the La Parka mask.
Yeah. Yep. That exists.
It's
You know, I have two lucha masks. I've got an El Santo mask, and I've got the I've got a LA Park mask too.
Yeah.
So it's funny that we both have that. I didn't know we both had that.
That's awesome.
You know, the same thing I was saying about Chono earlier. I think a lot of us got into the lucha style based on those guys coming over to do the WCW run.
Yeah.
Whenever the Mexican economy wasn't doing well, right? And you know, La Parka was one of those guys that came in, just an unbelievable costume, so over the top. The guy had a chair. He's playing a chair like air guitar. He's dancing around like a maniac. He's standing on the chair doing a crazy dance. He's bashing people over the head with a chair. I mean, that was just like so awesome to see that. And that kind of, you know, just like with Chono, that's what kind of got me into wanting to see a lot more of the international product. And I know the belts in Mexico are not they're really not treated the same way within the promotions as what they are in Japan or in the United States. But all that said, I mean, LA Park still the AAA champ. I mean, at one point, man, and that's a big deal. It's a big deal to be the face of the promotion, no matter where you're at, man. And that's really, really awesome. He's in the Observer Hall of Fame. Just such an iconic character when you think about that late 90s WCW, whenever they were really on fire, and that dude's out there just crushing people with chairs. I mean, so it's just so fun and so awesome, and everybody got into it so quick.
Yeah, some matches that I have here is from November 18th episode of Nitro, where he defeated Juventud Guerrera. That got a 3.5 stars by Dave. If you want to check out Super Brawl from 97. There was a 6-man tag with Conan, La Parka, and Villano 4, and they defeated Ciclope, Juventud Guerrera, and Supercalo in a 3.25 star match. And then there's another Nitro one. These Nitros, they're so good. He has a 4-star match in a 6-person tag on the May 26th episode of Nitro from 1997, where Hector Garza, Juventud Guerrera, and Supercalo face Ciclope, Damien, and La Parka. And so like they rattled some off. Another one, this got a 4.25 star, was from the Bash at the Beach 97. That was another 6-person tag with Hector Garza, Juventud Guerrera, and Lismark Jr. versus La Parka, Psychosis, and Villano 4. So all of this stuff from WCW is highly regarded. His Sold Out 98 match in an 8-person tag. There's so much good stuff. I will not mention his Super Brawl match versus Disco Inferno because fuck it. But
I mean, you gave me chills just mentioning all those people gave me chills because I just remember just those guys flying around all over the place and killing each other on those Nitros, man. What a time to be alive that was, man. To be a fan and watching those matches every week.
Yeah, and you know what? This era is, as much as everybody, specifically the host of this podcast, complains about AEW TV, it will be looked at the same way when we look at the random Nick Jackson and Ray Phoenix and Orange Cassidy versus do you know what I'm saying? Like, to me, we're seeing the modern iteration of that now. And it's really awesome. It really is. And that's when people talk about the nostalgia for WCW, that's where AEW does hold up, is that your TV delivers these matches that are pay-per-view quality every week. And even though the storyline, you want to tell me the storyline was Super Calo, LA Park, Hector Garza, but there isn't one. There's not. It doesn't exist. But you watch that match and you're going to say, wow, that was great. That's the way that these dynamites are going to be viewed, is that people are going to, in 20 years, look back and say, holy cow, wrestling TV then was something, wasn't it? They are, because we do see that every week.
Even looking at the stuff that he's done recently, it's just amazing to think that this guy's still going and he's still killing it in the ring. I mean, even recently.
And he looks terrible.
Yeah,
and he looks absolutely terrible. He does not look like anybody that should be able to do anything physical without immediately getting an IV and a oxygen mask.
Yeah. But that Triple Mania show from a month and a half ago with him and Adonis. And Sam Adonis is really good, man. That's Corey Graves' brother. I don't know if you guys know that or not, but it's LA Park, Psycho Clown, Roosh, and Sam Adonis. You know, the Mask vs. Hair 4-way got rated really high. And then even before that, the Triple Mania, the Tijuana match from July, the same guys only in the tag. And that was a 4-way match at the August show, but then the July show, it was a tag team match. It went to a draw, which set up the August show, man. So I mean, you think about highly rated matches this guy has had, and even before that, I mean, the match was Blue Demon Jr., DMT Azul, and LA versus LA Park and Rouge, 4.5-star match from April, man. I mean, like we're talking about April, July, August of this year. We're talking about that, and this guy is still having killer matches versus matches that we were talking about from freaking Nitro from '96. I mean, it's amazing to think about that a guy that has a career that has extended that long and still just so entertaining and so good in the ring and just in there killing it, man.
And with that, that is our first entrance into the Podski 100. That is 100 to 91. We got a long ways to go. We will be doing 90 through 81 here shortly. So if you like what we did here, stick around and you'll catch it on all the socials. You'll check it out wherever you get your podcast and on YouTube as well. Leave a comment if you like our list so far. If you enjoyed any matches, want to leave any comments, let them below and we'll get to them. And I got to thank Teddy Mongoose, Justin Andretti, and JC, the Podski dog, for hopping on here and doing this and putting your list together. This was pretty fun. I can't wait to see what we got for the rest of the list.
Awesome, man. That was great.
And
thank you guys.
No, thank you.
Mutual Appreciation Society.
And with that, we will see you next time on the Podski.